The sky did not break slowly. It tore open like flesh beneath a blade, and through that wound fell fire. The people of the New World looked up. Farmers dropped their tools. Priests clutched their holy symbols. Children pointed with trembling fingers at the burning star that screamed across the twilight. It was not a star. The strike cruiser Eternal Vigil carved through the atmosphere like a dying god. Metal shrieked and plasma bled from ruptured engines. The ship was ancient, had fought in crusades that predated memory, had cleansed worlds in the God Emperor's name. Now it fell twisting, breaking apart piece by piece. On the bridge, Inquisitor Helbrecht Kael gripped the command throne. Blood ran from his temple. Around him, servitors sparked and died. The warp rift had taken them by surprise, a tear in reality that should not exist, could not exist in a galaxy already drowning in madness. "All hands brace for impact," he said. His voice was calm. Faith did not permit fear. The ship struck the earth. The world shook. Mountains cracked. Rivers changed their course. In the capital city of Erantal, walls that had stood for centuries fell like children's toys. The impact crater glowed red in the darkness, a wound in the planet itself. For a moment there was only dust and prayer, and in the ruins of the ship, in chambers still lit by emergency lights, Inquisitor Kael opened his eyes. He lived. The God Emperor had preserved him for a purpose. Around him, space marines of the Black Templars pulled themselves from wreckage. Their armor was scorched black. Their weapons still functioned. They were fewer now. Perhaps 200 survived from a company of 1,000. But 200 space marines could cleanse a world. "Status," Kael commanded. Captain Lucian Varos approached. His helmet was cracked, showing one eye cold blue, unblinking. "We are combat-capable, Inquisitor. The ship's weapons are dead. Void shields are gone, but we live. The Emperor protects." "The Emperor protects," Kael repeated. He looked at the broken hull above them, at the alien stars beyond. "We are far from the Imperium. Whatever world we have crashed upon it will learn the price of heresy." They did not know they had fallen into a world already conquered. 300 kilometers away in the tomb city of Nazarick Ainz Ual, Gaun sat upon his throne. He did not breathe. Had not breathed in years. His skeletal hands rested on the armrests, unmoving. To any observer, he appeared as a statue, a monument to death carved from bone and wrapped in robes of deepest black. But behind the empty sockets of his skull, a mind worked, calculating. Always calculating. The magical sensors had detected it first, an energy signature that didn't belong to this world, not magic in any form he recognized, not the wild sorcery of dragons or the divine power of gods. This was something else, something that made the very air taste wrong. Albedo entered the throne room. She moved with perfect grace, her white dress flowing like water. When she knelt before him, it was with the devotion of a priest before an altar. "My lord," she said, "the entity that fell from the sky has been located. Shall I dispatch forces to investigate?" Ainz considered. In his previous life, he would have felt curiosity, excitement, fear. Now he felt nothing, only the cold logic that had replaced his heart when he became undead. But logic was enough. "Send Demiurge and a reconnaissance unit," he said. His voice was measured, controlled. "Observe only. Do not engage. I want to know what we are dealing with." "As you command." Albedo rose. For a moment something flickered in her eyes, pride perhaps, or love. With her it was always hard to tell. She disappeared through the doors and Ainz was alone again. He looked at his hands. Bone, nothing but bone. He had conquered this world through strength and strategy, had bent nations to his will, had made himself a god in the eyes of mortals. And yet sometimes in moments like this, he wondered what it meant to rule a world when you could no longer feel the weight of the crown. A screen materialized before him, showing the crater from Nazarick's scrying spells. The ship was massive, larger than any fortress he had seen in this world. Its architecture was brutal functional, covered in symbols that hurt to look at. And around it, figures in black armor were moving. Ainz leaned forward, enhanced the image. The armor was like nothing in his database. The weapons they carried glowed with power he could not identify. And on their shoulders, each one bore the same symbol, a two-headed eagle, its wings spread in judgment. Interesting, Ain said to the empty throne room. He did not know he had just seen the symbol of the Imperium of man. Did not know that the figures below were Space Marines warriors, bred for genocide. Did not know that the man leading them had burned 100 worlds for the crime of thinking differently than his emperor commanded. He didn't know, but he would learn. The meeting happened 3 days later. Demiurge had reported what his scouts had seen: soldiers in armor that could not be scratched by conventional weapons, weapons that fired projectiles of light, and everywhere, devotion, fanatical, unshakable devotion to their distant emperor. Ains made his decision. He would meet them himself. He appeared at the crater's edge at dawn alone. This was calculated. One figure unarmed approaching openly. It was the gesture of either a fool or a god. Ains had learned that in this world the two often looked the same. The Space Marines saw him immediately. Bolters rose. Targeting lasers painted red dots across his robes, but they did not fire. They were soldiers, yes, but soldiers who understood the value of intelligence. Inquisitor Kyle walked forward. He carried no visible weapon, but Ains could sense power radiating from him. Not magic. Something else. Something that whispered at the edges of his consciousness like static. They stopped 10 paces apart. Two figures under a foreign sun. One wrapped in the authority of a galactic empire. One wearing the majesty of death itself. "I am Inquisitor Helbrecht Kyle of the Ordo Hereticus," the man said. His voice was hard as iron. "By the authority of the God Emperor of mankind, I command you to identify yourself." Ains tilted his head slightly, a gesture he had practiced meant to convey curiosity without threat. "I am Ains Ual Gaun, sorcerer king of Nazarick. You have fallen onto my world." "Your world." Kale's expression did not change. "No world belongs to the Xenos or the heretic. All worlds are the Emperor's by right of conquest. Conquest." Ains repeated the word slowly. "You speak of conquest to one who has conquered. Interesting. You are undead." It was not a question. Kael's eyes, and they were Zealot's eyes, burning with faith, swept over Ans's skeletal form. An abomination. A creature that lives in defiance of natural law. Such things cannot be permitted to exist. Cannot be permitted. Ains felt something then. Not anger, he could not feel anger. But something close, a cold assessment of threat. "Tell me, Inquisitor, in your empire, who decides what is permitted to exist?" "The Emperor, the God Emperor of mankind, Master of Terra, Lord of the Imperium, he who sits upon the golden throne and guides humanity through the darkness. A god." Ains's jaw didn't move, but his voice carried something that might have been amusement. "You follow a god. How enlightening." Kael's hand moved to his belt. Around them, Space Marines tensed. The morning air grew thick with potential violence. "You speak blasphemy," Kael said quietly. "The Emperor is not belief. He is truth. He is light. He is the only thing that stands between humanity and the darkness of the warp." "And yet," Ans replied, "faith without proof is merely conviction in the dark." "Then let me show you light." Kyle's smile was sharp as a blade. "The Emperor does not waste his power on individual abominations. That is why he created us. We are his hands, his judgment, his mercy." He raised his arm. In the orbit above a strike cruiser, damaged but operational, received his signal. "Orbital strike Kaya," Kale commanded. "Coordinates locked on my position. Prepare to fire on my mark." Ains looked up. His magical senses screamed warning. Above, beyond the atmosphere, weapons older than civilizations were charging. Enough destructive power to level mountains, to boil seas, to turn entire armies into ash and memory. "You would kill yourself?" Ains asked. "I would die 1,000 times to cleanse one such as you." Kael's smile widened. "But I will not die today. My faith protects me. The Emperor protects me. You, creature, have only your arrogance." "Fire," Kael said. Light fell from heaven. Ains disappeared. The orbital lance struck the ground where he had stood. Stone became plasma, earth became glass. The shockwave leveled everything within a kilometer. Tens of thousands died in that instant, soldiers, civilians, undead servants who had been approaching to defend their king. When the light faded, Kyle stood untouched within a sphere of shimmering energy, a Rosarius field faith-made shield. Around him, his space marines were protected by their armor's systems. He looked at the smoking crater and nodded. One abomination destroyed. Scans indicate approximately 12,000 additional casualties. Acceptable losses. We will establish a base here. Begin conversion of the native population. This world will serve the Emperor, or it will burn. Captain Varos approached. Inquisitor sensors are detecting movement. Underground, multiple signatures coming toward us. Kyle turned. From the depths of the earth, from the tomb city of Nazareth, came a sound. Not loud, not threatening, simply present. It was laughter. Owens' voice echoed across the battlefield, amplified by magic. Inquisitor Kyle, you have made your point. Now permit me to make mine. The ground opened. From it rose an army. Not the scattered forces of a kingdom, an army. Undead warriors in perfect formation, death knights mounted on skeletal steeds, elder liches wreathed in dark flame, and above them all floating on wings of darkness, Ain's Uul gown, unharmed, unbowed. Your emperor, Ain said, is not the only god who protects his chosen. He raised one skeletal hand. Nazareth, he commanded. War. The world learned a new prayer that day. It was the sound of the dead rising. War came to the new world not as a storm, but as a religion. And every prayer was a declaration of war. Within 7 days of the orbital strike, 3 kingdoms had declared their allegiance, not to Ons, not to the Imperium, to the idea that gods walked among them and survival meant choosing the right one. The slain theocracy moved first. In the grand cathedral of their capital, beneath vaulted ceilings painted with scenes of divine judgment, the cardinals convened. They had watched the sky burn, had felt the earth shake, had received reports of black-armored angels descending from heaven, and of the sorcerer king rising from his tomb to meet them. Cardinal Raymond sat at the head of the council table. He was old, older than the kingdom itself, some whispered. His hands trembled as he placed them flat on the ancient wood. Brothers and sisters, he said, his voice carried the weight of prophecy. We have prayed for deliverance from the undead king. The gods have answered. The candles flickered as if in answer. Somewhere above, the painted faces of saints watched in silence. Around the table, heads nodded, but one voice spoke against the tide. Those are not gods. Zeshi Zetsume stood by the window watching the distant horizon where Nazareth's towers pierced the sky. She was their greatest weapon, half elf, half god, wholly dangerous. I have felt their presence. They burn with something that is not divine. It is colder, harder, like faith made into iron. Then they are instruments of the gods, Raymond replied, sent to test us, to cleanse this world of abomination, or to replace one tyrant with another. Zeshi turned from the window. Her eyes mismatched, one gold and one silver fixed on the cardinal. Have you seen what they do to those who refuse conversion? I have. They do not offer mercy. They offer obedience or ash. Silence filled the chamber. Then Raymond stood. When he spoke, his voice shook the air like thunder. Then we will be obedient. Better to serve heaven than bow to hell. Send emissaries to these space marines. Tell them the theocracy stands ready to serve their emperor. In exchange, we ask only one thing. He smiled. Help us destroy Nazareth. The vote was unanimous. The alliance was sealed in blood and prayer. 300 kilometers away in the throne room of Nazareth, Albedo delivered the news. My lord, the theocracy has allied with the Imperium. They are calling it the Radiant Crusade. She knelt before Ains, her wings folded tight against her back. Intelligence suggests they are massing forces along our eastern border. Approximately 40,000 human soldiers, 200 space marines, and something else, a weapon they are calling the Divine Lumen. Our scouts could not get close enough to identify it. Ains sat motionless on his throne. Around him, the other guardians stood in attendance. Demiurge, his hands clasped behind his back, expression thoughtful. Shalter, her crimson eyes gleaming with barely contained violence. Cocytus, massive and still as a glacier. Aura and Mare, the twins standing close together as always. The Baharuth Empire, Ons asked. Split Demerge replied. Emperor Jerkniv has publicly declared neutrality, but our sources indicate internal conflict. Half his court wishes to join us. The other half sees the Imperium as liberation from your rule. Civil war is likely within the month. And Riestes, a battlefield. Albedo's voice was cold. The kingdom no longer exists as a unified entity. Imperium forces have established outposts in the northern territories. Our undead hold the south. The civilian population, she paused. They pray to both sides and die to neither's satisfaction. Ains processed this information with the mechanical precision that had replaced emotion. Strategy, tactics, resource allocation, these were the languages he understood now. But something else stirred in the depths of his consciousness, something he had felt during the orbital strike when thousands of his subjects had died in an instant. Not grief, he could not feel grief, but something adjacent to it, a recognition of loss, of waste. Demiurge, he said, your assessment? The demon smiled. The Imperium has made a tactical error. They have united our enemies, yes, but they have also given us moral clarity. Before we conquered for expansion, now we defend our existence. The difference is significant. Soldiers fight harder when they believe death is the alternative to victory. They also fight harder when they believe in gods. Ains leaned forward slightly. Faith sharpens the blade. This Inquisitor Kael he truly believes. I saw it in his eyes. He would die 1,000 times if it meant destroying one undead. That kind of conviction is difficult to counter with logic alone. Then we do not counter it with logic, Shaltir said. Her voice was soft, but carried an edge like broken glass. We drown it in blood. Let me lead the vanguard, Lord Ains. I will paint the earth red with their faith. No. Ains raised one skeletal hand. Not yet. Before we commit to full war, I need to understand what we are truly facing. He stood. The Guardians immediately dropped to one knee. I will go to the border myself, Ains continued, to where our territory meets theirs. I want to see this divine lumen. I want to feel what these space marines are. And I want to know, he paused. I want to know what gives them such certainty. My lord, Albedo's voice was urgent. It could be a trap. They nearly killed you once with orbital fire. To expose yourself again would demonstrate confidence. Ains looked at her. And confidence is what holds kingdoms together. Our subjects must see that their king does not hide behind walls, that he walks among them unafraid. You are undead, Demiurge said quietly. You cannot feel fear. No, Ains agreed, but I can perform it. And in war, performance is often more important than truth. He walked toward the exit. The Guardians fell in behind him. As they moved through the corridors of Nazarick past armories that held enough weapons to arm nations, past barracks, where Death Knights stood in perfect rows past the treasury where wealth beyond counting lay unused, Ains felt something unusual. Anticipation, not the biological response he had lost with his humanity. This was different. A purely intellectual curiosity about what would happen when he stood at the border between two philosophies and demanded they explain themselves. Behind his skeletal face, Suzuki Satoru, the man who had become Ains Ual Gaun, wondered if gods ever got nervous. The border was a wound in the earth. On one side, Nazarick's territory, orderly, efficient, maintained by undead who never tired and never questioned. Fields grew in perfect rows. Roads ran straight as arrows. Towns functioned with mechanical precision. On the other side, the Radiant Crusade chaos organized by faith. Tents sprawled across the landscape like a city made of canvas. Campfires burned in the thousands. The sound of prayer rose like smoke, sweet, suffocating, endless. Incense and ash hung thick in the air. Ains stood at the exact center where the borderline had been drawn. With him were only Albedo and Demiurge, a show of confidence. Behind them, visible on the horizon, Nazarick's forces assembled. Death Knights, elder leeches, armies that did not breathe, did not sleep, did not break. Across from them, Inquisitor Kael approached with Captain Varos and a figure Ains had not seen before, a woman in white armor emblazoned with the symbol of the two-headed eagle. Her presence radiated something that made the air itself feel heavy. Canoness Miriel Solde, Kael introduced her, champion of the Adeptus Sororitas. She has come to witness your final defiance. The canoness said nothing. She simply stared at Ains with eyes that burned with certainty. Defiance? Ains repeated the word slowly. An interesting choice. I would call this negotiation. There is nothing to negotiate, Kael replied. The Emperor's will is absolute. You will surrender Nazarick. Your undead will be destroyed. You will be granted the mercy of true death. These terms are not negotiable. Then why are we talking? The question hung in the air. Caedl's expression did not change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Uncertainty, just for a moment. Because, Ains continued, you are not as certain as you pretend. You have seen what Nazarick can do. You know that even if you win, the cost will be devastating. So you hope I will surrender. You hope that logic will prevail over pride. Hope is a luxury. Canoness Miriel spoke for the first time. Her voice was clear as crystal. We deal in faith. Faith. Ains tilted his head. Tell me, Canoness, when you pray to your emperor, does he answer, every moment I live is his answer, and if you died, would that also be his answer? She smiled. It was a gentle expression, almost kind. Yes. Her serenity unnerved him more than Kael's fury ever had. Ains studied her. Here was something different from Kael's burning zealotry. This woman had thought about death, had made peace with it, had weaponized it into something that could not be threatened or bargained with. Dangerous. Then we have nothing more to discuss, Ains said. You have your faith. I have my certainty. Let us see which one bleeds first. He turned to leave, but stopped when he felt it. A pressure in the air, a wrongness, something that made even his undead nerves scream warning. Behind the Imperium lines, something was being unveiled, a weapon the size of a cathedral draped in prayer silk and surrounded by chanting priests. As the covers fell away, Ains saw it clearly. It was not a cannon, not in any conventional sense. It was a conduit, a massive construct of gold and bone covered in scripture and sealed with blood. At its heart, a sphere of light pulsed with a rhythm that felt almost alive. The divine lumen, Kael said. His voice carried satisfaction. Blessed by 1,000 priests, powered by the faith of 10,000 believers, aimed directly at Nazarick. Ains felt something then, not fear, not quite, but a recognition that this weapon was different from the orbital lance. That was technology. This was something else. This was belief given form. One last chance, Kael called out. Surrender, or we will show you what happens when heaven's light touches hell's shadow. Ains did not respond immediately. He reached out with his magical senses probing the weapon. What he felt made his undead heart, the conceptual heart that powered his existence, skip a metaphorical beat. The weapon was pulling energy from somewhere else, not from this world, from beyond. Through a tear in reality he had seen before but not understood. Through the warp. Fire when ready, Ains said quietly. Albedo gasped, My lord. Do it, Ains interrupted, speaking to Kael. Show me this divine light. I want to see it. I want to feel it. I want to understand it. Kael stared at him. For a long moment nothing happened. Then the Inquisitor raised his hand. May the Emperor have mercy on your soul, he said. I have no soul, Ains replied. Only purpose. For a heartbeat, even the warp seemed to hold its breath. The divine lumen fired. Light consumed the world, and in that light, Ains Ualgown felt something he had not felt since becoming undead. Pain, not physical, deeper. The light was not destroying his body. It was touching something else, something he had thought lost forever when Suzuki Satoru died and Ains was born. His humanity. The light burned away the undead protection, the emotional suppression, the logical shields he had built around himself. For one terrible, brilliant moment, he felt everything. Fear, loss, loneliness, the weight of ruling a kingdom he never wanted, the grief of outliving his friends, the horror of becoming a monster while still remembering what it meant to be human. He remembered laughter, voices in a guild hall long vanished, the sound of human warmth, fragile and finite. He felt it all. And then he understood. The warp was not just energy. It was emotion made manifest. It was every feeling humanity had ever felt compressed and distilled and weaponized. The divine lumen was channeling that power, directing it like a spear through the heart of everything undead, everything without emotion, everything like him. The light faded. Ain stood where he had been seemingly unchanged. His robes were untouched, his bones unscathed. Albedo and Demiurge flanked him, their own dark powers having shielded them. Across the border, Kael lowered his hand. Confusion crossed his face. "Impossible," he whispered. "The divine lumen should have." It did. Ains's voice was different now, softer, almost human. It showed me exactly what I needed to see. He raised both hands. The air around him began to shimmer, not with magic, with something else, something that responded to what he had just experienced. "You channel the warp through faith," Ain said. "You call it divine, but faith is just focused emotion, and emotion—" He smiled. Impossible for a skeleton, but somehow his presence conveyed it anyway. "Emotion is what I just learned to feel again." The shimmer around him intensified. Purple light began to leak from his bones. His eye sockets ignited with a flame that was not fire. "Thank you, Inquisitor," Ain said. "You have given me the key I was missing." The ground beneath him cracked, not from force, from change. Reality itself was bending around him as he began to pull at the same power source the divine lumen had used. He was absorbing the warp. "Fall back!" Kael shouted. "All units fall back now!" But it was too late. Ains had learned a new language, and he was about to speak it fluently. The order came at dawn. Exterminatus. Not the kind that cracked planets. Not yet. But the kind that erased cities, that turned fortresses into glass, that made examples of those who defied the God Emperor's will. The kind the Inquisition called merciful. Inquisitor Kael stood in the command cathedral of the Eternal Vigil, what remained of it. The ship would never fly again, but its weapons still functioned, its void shield still held, its crew still prayed. "Target confirmed," the servitor intoned. Its voice was barely human, more machine than man. "Nazarick, Fortress Tomb, estimated civilian casualties in surrounding territories 200,000. Kael did not hesitate. "Acceptable. The Emperor protects the faithful. Begin bombardment." Space rippled. Drop pods screamed through the atmosphere like falling stars. Each one carried death in ceramite armor. Space Marines of the Black Templars warriors who knew no fear and no mercy. Captain Veros led the first wave. His armor was scarred from 1,000 battles. His blade had tasted the blood of aliens and heretics across a dozen worlds. Now it would taste undead. "For the Emperor!" he roared as his pod struck Earth. The assault had begun. Deep within Nazarick, alarms sang their warning. Ain stood in the throne room surrounded by his guardians. The purple light that had begun bleeding from his bones had not faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. The air around him shimmered with energy that should not exist. Warp power filtered through undead will emotion, channeled through absolute logic. "They are coming," Albedo said. Her voice was steady, but her wings trembled. 200 Space Marines, orbital support, and something else psychers, dozens of them chanting in unison. "They are trying to seal us, to trap us here while they kill us." "Let them come." Ains's voice was different now. Still calm, still measured, but underneath it ran something new. Not anger. Certainty. They want to test whether their God is stronger than ours. Very well. We will show them what divinity looks like when it stops pretending to be mortal. Demiurge stepped forward. "My lord, I have prepared contingencies. We can collapse the upper floors, force them into kill zones where—" "No!" Ains raised one skeletal hand. The purple light pulsed. "No more tactics. No more strategy. They came here seeking a holy war. We will give them one. Each guardian will defend their floor, hold nothing back, show them what it means to stand against Nazarick. My lord, Cocytus rumbled. His voice was deep as winter. We may not survive. I know. Ains looked at each of them in turn. Albedo, Demiurge, Shaltair, Cocytus, Aura and Mare holding hands like the children they appeared to be. You were created to be perfect. Let them see that perfection. Let them break against it like waves against stone. And when you fall, he paused. Trust that I will remember. Silence filled the throne room. Not the empty silence of death, but the full silence of understanding. It has been my greatest honor, Albedo said softly, to serve you. One by one, the guardians bowed. Then they dispersed to their stations. Ains sat alone on his throne and waited for the sound of gods at war. The first floor fell in minutes, not because it was weak. The undead there fought with perfect coordination, with weapons that had never known rust, with a discipline that came from having no fear of death. But Space Marines were built to fight the impossible. Bolters roared. Each shell was a prayer. Each kill was an offering. Brother Sergeant Marcus led his squad through corridors lined with skeletal warriors, his chainsword singing its hymn of destruction. They do not break, one of his brothers shouted. They feel no fear. Then we teach them terror, Marcus replied. He activated his jump pack, soaring over the undead lines, and brought his blade down through a Death Knight's helm. The warrior crumbled. In the Emperor's name, the floor was taken. But at the stairs leading down, they stopped. Something waited there. Cocytus emerged from the shadows like winter-given form. 4 arms, crystalline armor, eyes that reflected nothing but the cold mathematics of combat. In each hand he held a weapon, katana, halberd, nodachi, lance. Each one had tasted the blood of heroes. Honorable warriors, Cocytus said. His voice carried respect. I am guardian of the 5th floor. I will not permit passage. Stand aside, abomination, Marcus commanded, or be destroyed. I cannot stand aside. This is my purpose, my honor. Cocytus raised his weapons. Come, let us discover which is stronger, your faith or my duty. They came. 20 Space Marines charged as one. Bolter fire hammered against Cocytus like rain against a mountain. His armor held. His weapons moved in patterns too fast to follow each strike, precise as mathematics, brutal as winter. A Space Marine fell, then another, then 3 more. But they did not stop. They never stopped. Marcus reached him first. His chainsword met Cocytus's katana, and the sound was like reality breaking. They fought in the space between seconds, warrior to warrior, each one perfect in their own way. You fight well, Cocytus said. You understand honor. Honor, Marcus laughed. It was not a kind sound. I know only duty. Then we are the same. Cocytus's lance pierced Marcus's armor, found the flesh beneath. I regret this. Marcus fell. But as he fell, he whispered the oldest prayer. For him, on Terra. He triggered the melt-a-bomb strapped to his chest. The explosion was white-hot prayer. When it faded, Cocytus stood in the crater, his armor cracked, his weapons shattered. Around him, the surviving Space Marines raised their bolters. Honorable, Cocytus whispered. Blue light began to leak from his wounds. Not blood, but something colder. I die well. They fired until nothing remained but frozen fragments and the memory of winter. The 3rd floor belonged to Shaltair. She waited in the throne room she had made her own, surrounded by blood and beauty. Her dress was white as bone. Her eyes were red as slaughter. When the Grey Knights entered, psychers trained to fight demons, warriors who could kill with a thought. She smiled. Finally, she said, worthy prey. Grandmaster Enoch Thal led them. His armor was silver, inscribed with wards against chaos. His force sword hummed with psychic power. Behind him, 5 brothers in Terminator plate, each one a weapon of faith made flesh. Vampire, Thal said, we offer you no mercy. You are undead, unnatural, an insult to life itself. Insult? Shaltair's smile widened, showing fangs. I am perfection. I am beauty eternal. I am what humanity dreams of when it dreams of never dying. She stood. Come, let me show you eternity. The Grey Knights charged. Psychic lightning filled the air. Thal's sword blazed with holy fire. His brothers moved in perfect formation, a wall of silver death. Shaltair moved faster. She was among them before they could blink. Her lance, the Spewed. Lance artifact of legend, pierced Terminator armor like paper. One Grey Knight fell, then another. But Thal was different. His psychic power was a fortress, his faith a shield. When Shaltair struck at him, his wards flared and threw her back. You cannot touch me, creature, he said. The Emperor protects. Then let me test his protection. Shaltair's eyes began to glow. Purple light, warp light mixed with her crimson power. When had she learned that? How, it did not matter. She lunged. Their battle shook the floor. Force sword against vampire lance, faith against hunger. Each strike was a theology, each parry a prayer. Shaltair was faster, stronger, immortal, but Thal was certain. Begone, demon! He thrust his sword through her chest. Psychic fire poured into her, burning away her corruption, her darkness, her love. For Ains, for Nazarick, for the only purpose she had ever known. No, she whispered. Blood, her own blood, ran from her lips. Not yet. I have not. He has not seen. She grabbed the sword. It burned her hands to ash, but she held on, pulled herself closer to Thal, close enough to whisper. Tell him, she said. Tell your Emperor, we do not fall easily. She exploded, not into gore, but into feeling. For an instant, the room was made of devotion, not physically. Her warp-touched blood detonated like a bomb of pure emotion, rage and love and devotion and despair, all compressed into a single instant. The psychic backlash killed Thal instantly. His brothers followed moments later, their minds shattered by feelings they had been trained to never experience. When the light faded, nothing remained but ash and the faint scent of roses. Albedo held the throne room. She had sent the others away. Aura and Mare to protect the treasury, Demiurge to coordinate the rear guard. Only she remained standing before the great doors that led to Ains's throne. The Space Marines who reached her had fought through 6 floors of hell. They were wounded, exhausted. Their armor was scorched and dented. Their ammunition was running low, but they had not stopped. Captain Varos led them. His face was a mask of blood and determination. Behind him, 40 brothers, all that remained of 200. One last obstacle, he said to Albedo. Stand aside and we will make your death swift. No. Albedo's wings spread wide. In her hand, her war scythe gleamed black as void. You will not touch him. I would sooner die 1,000 times than allow you to harm a single bone of his body. Then die once, Varos said, and be done with it. The orbital lance struck. They had been saving it, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment when all their forces were clear of the impact zone. Now they fired directly through Nazarick's roof, a spear of light aimed at the throne room. Albedo saw it coming, had perhaps always known it would end this way. She could dodge, could save herself. Instead, she spread her wings wider, planted her feet, and called upon every ounce of power she possessed, her demon blood, her creator's love, and now the purple taint of warp that had begun to seep into all of Nazarick. The lance hit her. She caught it. For 3 seconds, love held against orbital fire, not physically. She created a shield of pure will, of absolute devotion, of love so fierce it bent reality. The lance struck her shield and stopped. For 3 seconds, she held it, held back the fury of heaven, held the line. Then her shield cracked. Ain Sama, she whispered. Forgive me. I was not strong enough. The light consumed her. In the throne room, Ains felt it. Cositus. Shaltair. Albedo. Gone. Not dead. Death was too simple. Erased. Unmade. Each one a piece of his kingdom, of his power, of his purpose torn away. And for the first time since becoming undead, Ains Ual Gown felt something that made the warp itself pause. Grief. Not data. Not analysis. Grief, not the logical recognition of loss, not the tactical understanding that his forces were depleted. Real grief, human grief, the kind that tears holes in souls. He stood from his throne. The The purple light around him intensified. Cracks began to appear in the air itself, small tears in reality leaking colors that had no names, sounds that existed only in nightmares. Varos and his remaining brothers entered the throne room. They saw a skeleton in robes, saw a king without flesh, saw an enemy they had been trained to destroy. They did not see the god about to be born. "You killed them," Ain said quietly. His voice was soft, gentle, terrible. "You killed my friends." "They were abominations," Varos replied. "Creatures of darkness, the Emperor." "Your Emperor." Ain's eye sockets ignited with purple fire. "Your faith, your certainty, you hide behind it like children behind their mother's skirts. You kill because it makes you feel righteous, because it gives your meaningless lives purpose." He raised both hands. The cracks in reality widened. "I will show you what lies beyond faith, beyond certainty, beyond the comfortable lies you tell yourselves in the dark." The warp answered. Not the chaotic, screaming warp of the ruinous powers. This was different. This was warp filtered through undead logic, through absolute control, through a mind that could feel emotion without being enslaved by it. This was warp leashed. Ain spoke a word. It was not in any language humans knew. It was the sound of entropy reversing, of death running backward, of reality admitting it had made a mistake. Necrogenesis. The floor cracked. From those cracks rose figures wreathed in purple light. Causitus. But now his armor was carved from warp ice, his eyes burning with cold fire. Shalter. But now her wings were made of solidified emotion, her blood flowing with the screams of the faithless. Albedo. But now her devotion had been given physical form, a halo of absolute loyalty that burned brighter than any sun. They were not alive, not dead. They were something new, warp undead, beings that existed between states powered by emotion but controlled by will. "Kill them," Ains commanded. The Guardians moved. What happened next could not be properly described. The Space Marines fought with every weapon they possessed, every prayer they knew, every ounce of faith their training had instilled. It was not enough. Causitus moved through them like winter through autumn. His touch froze, not flesh, but conviction. Space Marines dropped their weapons, forgot why they were fighting, stood confused as children while he ended them. Shalter drank not blood but certainty. Each bite left her victims questioning, doubting, wondering if perhaps their emperor had been wrong. The doubt killed them faster than any blade. Albedo simply loved them to death. Her halo touched them, and they felt devotion so pure, so absolute, that their own faith seemed hollow in comparison. Their hearts stopped trying. Captain Varos died last. He fell to his knees before Ains, his armor shattered, his weapons gone, his faith finally broken. "What?" he gasped. "What are you?" Ains looked down at him. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of revelation. "I am what happens when death learns to feel, when logic embraces madness, when order claims chaos as its own." He leaned closer. "I am the god in the warp, and you have helped me ascend." Varos's eyes widened. In them, Ain saw understanding, recognition, horror. "The Emperor," Varos whispered. "Forgive me." "Your Emperor," Ain said gently, "is about to learn he is not alone in godhood." The throne room filled with purple light, not gradually, all at once. The light spread beyond Nazarick, beyond the battlefield, beyond the planet itself. It touched the warp, and the warp for the first time in its existence felt something it had never experienced before. Order. 3 days later, the Radiant Crusade discovered they could no longer contact their fleet. Every Vox channel was filled with static. Every psychic communication ended in screaming. Every attempt to call for reinforcements met with silence. Above the new world, the warp had changed. The storms were still there. The madness remained. But now, within the chaos, there were patches of calm, spaces where emotion ran cold instead of hot, where the screaming stopped, where something new had taken root. In the command tent, Inquisitor Kael received a message. It was not transmitted by Vox or psychic sending. It simply appeared words written in purple fire on the air itself. It read, I thank you for teaching me about faith. Now, let me teach you about certainty. Nazareth comes. Wait for us." The message faded. In its place, a new star appeared in the sky. Purple, cold, beautiful. Kyle recognized it immediately. It was not a star. It was Nazareth. The tomb fortress had detached from the planet, was rising through the atmosphere, was entering the warp itself. "Sound the retreat," Kyle whispered. "Get everyone off this world. Now, now." But it was too late. Nazareth had learned to fly, and it was hungry. 3 days. That was how long the silence lasted. 3 days without communication, without orbital contact, without prayer being answered. The Radiant Crusade waited at the border, their weapons aimed at empty sky, their faith tested by the absence of their enemy. Inquisitor KL knelt in his command tent. Around him, candles burned. Their light flickered despite the absence of wind. He had been praying for 72 hours without rest, without food, without certainty. His lips moved in familiar liturgy, words he had spoken 1,000 times, words that had always brought comfort. They brought nothing now. "God Emperor," he whispered, "grant me wisdom, grant me sight, show me what we face." The candles went out, all of them, at once. In the sudden darkness, something answered, not the Emperor, something else. A presence that felt like winter and mathematics like grief wearing the mask of logic. A voice spoke directly into his mind. "You wanted to see God. Now you will." The tent filled with purple light. Nazareth hung in the void between worlds, not in orbit, not in space. In the warp itself, that realm of madness and emotion, of screaming gods and tortured souls. The tomb fortress floated there like a monument to impossible things, its towers piercing dimensions, its walls built from stone that remembered being alive. Inside in the throne room, Ain stood before a mirror that reflected nothing. He looked at his hands. They were bone as always, white, fleshless, dead. But now purple fire leaked from the joints. Warp energy ran through him like blood through veins he no longer possessed. "My lord." Demiurge approached his steps, careful. "The transformation is complete. Nazareth has fully integrated with the warp. We exist in both realms simultaneously, anchored to reality by will alone. And the others? Stable. The guardians you resurrected are adapting. Shalter has learned to move through emotional currents. Cositus can freeze concept itself. Albedo," he paused. "Albedo has become something we do not yet have words for. Her devotion has achieved physical form. She radiates loyalty like a star radiates light." Ains nodded slowly. He could feel them. All of them. Not through magical connection, but through something deeper. Their emotions, love, duty, honor, were threads connecting them to him through the warp. He was their anchor, their God, their reason for existing in defiance of natural law. The weight of it should have crushed him. Instead, it made him feel almost human again. "Summon them," Ains commanded. "All of them. It is time they understood what they have become." The guardians assembled in the throne room. They were different now. Not physically, though, each bore marks of their resurrection. Cositus's armor was carved from frozen warp stuff, shifting between solid and liquid based on his will. Shaltir's wings were made of crystallized emotion, sharp enough to cut through reality. Albedo's halo blazed with devotion so pure it hurt to perceive directly. But the real change was in their eyes. They saw more now, understood more. The warp had opened their perception to truths that mere existence could not teach. Aura spoke first, her voice small but steady. "Lord Ains, we remember dying." "I know. And being dead." Mare added, his hands clutching his sister's. "We were empty, cold, nothing." "I know." "Then you brought us back." Cositus's voice carried weight like continents shifting. "You reached into death itself and claimed us. Why?" Ains was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than they had ever heard it. "Because I am not ready to be alone." The words hung in the air like prayer. I have lived for years as something other than human, Ains continued. I have ruled kingdoms, commanded armies, made decisions that ended millions of lives, and I did it all without feeling, without grief or joy or fear. I was perfect, logical, efficient. He looked at each of them in turn. And I was empty, just as you were, just as death makes all things empty. His eye sockets blazed brighter. The divine lumen taught me something. When it burned me, it did not destroy my body. It touched my soul, made me remember what it was to feel, to hurt, to lose. The pain of being human, Shaltir whispered. Yes. Ains raised one skeletal hand. Purple fire danced across his fingers. The warp is emotion given form. Every feeling that has ever been felt exists there: rage, love, despair, hope. The chaos gods are born from those emotions, fed by them, made powerful through them. But they are slaves to emotion, Demiurge said, understanding dawning. They cannot control what they are, they simply are. Correct. Ains's hand closed into a fist. The purple fire compressed, became solid, became a sphere of condensed will. But I am undead. I can feel emotion without being consumed by it. I can touch the warp without drowning in it. I can be a god with a choice, Albedo finished. Her voice was awed. Not a god. Ains crushed the sphere. It dissolved into motes of light. Something else, something new, a being that exists between order and chaos, between life and death, between logic and madness. He stepped down from his throne, walked among them. For the first time since his transformation, he seemed almost fragile. You are my guardians, he said quietly, but you are also my proof. Proof that death does not have to be empty, that beings made of logic can still love, that even in a universe drowning in chaos, there can be islands of order. What would you have us do? Cositus asked. Ains looked up through the ceiling, through the walls, through the warp itself. His gaze pierced dimensions and saw what waited beyond. The Imperium of man worships a god who gave up his humanity to save them. The chaos gods feast on emotion without purpose or restraint. Both extremes have failed. Both have turned humanity into fuel for their existence. He turned back to his guardians. We will offer a third path, not faith without thought, not power without control, but something humanity has forgotten. His voice grew stronger. The right to choose their own gods, or to choose none at all. They will call us heretics, Albedo said. They already do. They will hunt us, Shaltir added. Let them try. They will never stop, Demiurge concluded. Good. On smiled. It was impossible. A skeleton cannot smile, but somehow the room felt his expression anyway. Then we will teach them what it means to face a god who refuses to die, who learns from his mistakes, who loves his followers not as fuel, but as family. He returned to his throne, sat. The purple light around him intensified until it filled the entire chamber. Nazarick, he addressed the fortress itself. We are going home. The warp rippled. On the new world, Inquisitor Kael stood at the crater where Nazarick once stood. The fortress was gone, simply gone. But the scar it left behind was not empty. Purple light leaked from cracks in the earth. Strange plants grew in impossible geometries. And at the center where the throne room had been, there was a monument, not built, grown, or perhaps dreamed into existence. It was an obelisk of black stone covered in script that hurt to read. Kyle approached it despite every instinct screaming to run. At its base, words were carved in Gothic, the holy language of the Imperium. He read them aloud and his voice shook. Here stood Nazarick, tomb of the Sorcerer King. Here we were invaded by those who called themselves righteous. Here we learned what gods truly are. We return now to the place between places. When we emerge, all will understand faith without mercy is tyranny. Power without purpose is chaos. But death with meaning, that is divine. Kael fell to his knees, not in prayer, in recognition. Emperor, preserve us, he whispered. We have not destroyed a heretic. We have created a religion. Behind him, Canones Miriel stood silent. She had survived the siege, had watched from orbit as Nazarick transformed, had felt the moment when the warp itself acknowledged a new player in the great game. "What do we do?" she asked quietly. Kael stood. His face was ashen, but his voice was steady. "We do what we always do. We report to the Inquisition. We tell them everything." He looked at the purple-stained earth, "And we pray that when Nazarick returns, we are ready." "And if we're not?" He did not answer. Deep in the warp at the edge of the Eye of Terror, Nazarick drifted to a stop. The fortress had changed. Its walls were no longer merely stone. They were something between solid and thought, between matter and memory. Towers rose in directions that should not exist. Gardens grew in courtyards where gravity was optional. And at its heart, the throne room pulsed with steady purple light. Ain sat upon his throne and felt the warp around him, felt the currents of emotion, the screams of the damned, the laughter of mad gods. He could sense them watching him, wondering, calculating. The chaos gods had noticed. From the north, a voice like knives and hunger corn god of war and blood. "You do not fight for fighting's sake. What use are you to me?" From the south, a whisper like silk over razor wire, Slayanesh, god of excess and pleasure. "You feel nothing with passion. You are incomplete, boring." From the east, a laugh like burning libraries, Tzinch, god of change and schemes. "You plan but without ambition. You change but toward no future I can see. You are unpredictable." From the west, a sigh like autumn and rot. "Nurgle, god of decay and endurance. You are death that does not decay, stagnation that still moves. You are a paradox, little king." "I love you for that." Ains listened to them all. Then he spoke, and his voice carried across the warp like a bell tolling in silence. "I am none of your pawns, none of your champions, none of your tools." He stood. "I am Ains Uol Gaun, the sorcerer king, the god in the warp, and I bring order to your chaos whether you will it or not." The chaos gods fell silent. For the first time in eternity, they faced something they did not understand. A being that used their power but refused their dominion. That touched the warp but would not drown. From the deepest darkness, a fifth voice spoke. Not a chaos god. Something older, colder, more terrible. The voice of the god emperor of mankind speaking across impossible distance from his golden throne on Terra. "What are you?" Ain smiled his impossible smile. "I am your mirror, your opposite, your equal." He spread his arms. "You sacrificed your humanity to save mankind. I sacrificed my humanity to rule it. You became a god to protect your species. I became a god because I refused to let my people die. Then we are enemies." "No." Ains lowered his arms. "We are alternatives. You offer faith. I offer choice. You demand worship. I accept service. You burn heretics. He paused. "I teach them better ways to think." "That is heresy." "Only if you are the sole arbiter of truth." Ain sat back on his throne. "But you are not. Not anymore. There is another god in the warp now, and I have learned something you forgot, God Emperor." "What is that, how to die?" Ains's voice was soft as falling snow. "I have died. My guardians have died. We have felt the void and returned from it. We know what lies beyond faith and fear, and we are not afraid of it anymore." The God Emperor's presence withdrew, but before it faded completely, Ains heard one final thought, barely a whisper. "Interesting." The warp settled. Nazarick floated in the space between madness and divinity. And Ains Uol Gaun, the undying sorcerer king, began to plan, not for conquest, not yet, for something more dangerous than war, for hope. The warp was not empty. That was the first lesson Nazarick learned. It was full of everything the galaxy tried to forget. The space between spaces, the realm of nightmares and possibility, was crowded, choked with souls and screams and things that had never been alive but remembered dying anyway. Ain stood at the highest tower of Nazarick, looking out at infinity. What he saw could not be properly described. colors that had no names, shapes that existed in too many dimensions, islands of stability floating in seas of madness, each one a fortress of some chaos warband or demon prince who had carved out territory in hell itself. "My lord," Demiurge approached from behind. His footsteps made no sound. "The navigator we captured is unconscious again. The third time today. She says the warp currents near us are wrong, calm when they should rage, ordered when they should scatter." He paused. "She says if every ship could travel in water like this, the Imperium would never fear the warp again." "She fears us." It was not a question. "Yes, more than she fears the demons. She says we are worse because we make sense." Demiurge's smile was razor thin. "I find that flattering." Ains said nothing. He reached out with his newfound senses, feeling the currents of emotion that flowed through this realm like blood through a dying body. He could feel them all now. Every murdered soul, every corrupted angel, every broken promise and shattered dream. The warp was humanity's pain made visible, and he was learning to navigate it. "Set course for the Eye of Terror," Ains commanded. "If we are to understand this universe, we must see its heart, where the Imperium's faith ends and Chaos's dominion begins. The Chaos gods will not welcome us. They do not need to. This is not their realm. It is humanity's, built from their emotions, fed by their suffering." Ains turned from the window. "And if humanity created it, then humanity can reclaim it." Demiurge bowed. "As you command." Nazarick began to move. Not through space. There was no space here. It moved through will, through intention, through the absolute certainty that it had a right to exist where madness said nothing should. Behind them, the warp closed like a healing wound. They were not alone in their journey. Things watched from the darkness. Not demons, those creatures of pure emotion that serve the chaos gods. These were different, older, stranger, fragments of civilizations that had fallen to the warp millennia ago, their souls trapped in endless cycles of torment and half-existence. One approached Nazarick. It had been an Eldar farseer once, had worn elegant armor and spoken prophecies that shaped worlds, had once guided entire craft worlds with a flick of thought. Now it floated like garbage memory held together by regret and habit. Now it was barely humanoid, a thing of stretched skin and too many eyes, all of them weeping colors that burned to witness. It spoke in a language that bypassed ears and wrote itself directly into consciousness. Dead thing, walking paradox, what brings you to the screaming dark? Ains regarded it without emotion. I go to the Eye of Terror. None go there willingly, none return unchanged. The gods feast there. Reality dies there. You will be consumed, will I. The creature circled Nazarick like a shark around drowning prey. Its many eyes studied the fortress, seeing things no mortal could comprehend. You are different. You smell of death but carry no rot. You touch warp but refuse corruption. You lead but do not dominate. It stopped. What are you? A choice. Ains paused. A possibility. An alternative to gods who demand everything and give nothing. There are no alternatives in the warp. Only slaves and masters. Only hunters and prey. Then I will be the first. Ains raised one skeletal hand. Purple fire danced across his bones. Tell the others what you have seen. Tell them the dead have learned to rule themselves. Tell them... He paused, considered, then spoke with absolute conviction. Tell them hope is not dead. It was simply waiting for someone willing to die for it. The creature stared at him with too many eyes. Then it laughed. The sound was like glass breaking in reverse, like time running backward, like sanity remembering what it once was. Hope. In the warp. You're either the bravest fool I have ever met or the most dangerous thing in this cursed realm. It began to fade. I will spread your message, dead king, and we will see which gods listen." It vanished. Nazarick moved on. Days passed, or perhaps years. Time was negotiable in the warp. Nazarick existed in the eternal now, moving forward through sheer determination while the universe screamed that it should not be possible. The fortress itself was changing, slowly, subtly. The stone walls learned to breathe. The gardens grew flowers that bloomed in impossible colors. The corridors sometimes led to places they had never connected before, as if Nazarick was exploring itself, discovering rooms that had always existed but never been noticed. Aura and Mare spent their days in the gardens tending to plants that responded to emotion rather than water. Where Aura walked, thorns grew. Where Mare passed, soft moss appeared. Together they created ecosystems that should not exist, life growing in the realm of death. Shalter discovered she could taste emotions in the warp. Each feeling had a flavor. Fear was bitter, love was sweet, despair tasted like ashes. She walked through Nazarick, sampling the emotional residue of its inhabitants, learning their secrets through their pain. Cocytus stood at the gates, unmoving, eternal. His duty had not changed, but now he could freeze concept as well as flesh. When a demon leapt at him, roaring, "I hunger," Cocytus froze the word, hunger itself. The daemon dropped confused, unable to remember what wanting felt like. Then he killed it. Albedo spent her time with Ains, not speaking, simply being present. Her devotion had become so absolute, so pure, that it warped space around her. Lesser beings could not approach. Greater beings hesitated. Some demons called her the Black Bride. None of them said it twice. She was his shield, his proof, his reminder that even in a universe of chaos, loyalty could be unwavering. And Pandora's actor. He explored, took forms he had never considered, became emotions themselves, joy, rage, melancholy, and walked through the warp wearing feelings like costumes. He was the Speak, the infiltrator, the one who would whisper Aintz's message into the ears of powers that thought themselves beyond such things. Nazarick was not merely surviving the warp, it was learning from it. On the seventh day, or the 7th century, who could say they saw it? The Eye of Terror. It was not an eye, not really. But human language had no words for what it truly was. A wound in reality so massive that entire star systems existed inside it. A place where the warp bled into real space so completely that the two could not be distinguished. It was the heart of chaos. The throne room of mad gods. The place where sanity went to die. Ains looked upon it and felt something unexpected. Recognition. "It's a tomb," he said quietly. Demiurge, standing beside him, turned. Demiurge blinked. Demiurge never blinked. "My lord, the Eye of Terror. It's not a weapon, not a conquest. It's a graveyard." Ains's voice carried sadness impossible for an undead, yet undeniable. This is where the Eldar Empire died, where a god was born from excess and slaughtered billions. All this madness, all this chaos, it's just grief that never learned to stop screaming. Then why come here? Because grief can be taught to rest. Ains looked at his guardian. Because tombs need keepers. Because someone must stand at the edge of madness and say no further. He turned back to the eye. Nazarick was a tomb in Yggdrasil. We were the keepers of the dead, of memory, of what was lost. His eye sockets blazed brighter. Perhaps that is still our purpose, not to conquer the warp, but to give it what it needs most. What is that, my lord? Ains was silent for a long moment. Then, a place to rest. Nazarick stopped at the edge of the Eye of Terror, not inside it, not outside it, exactly at the boundary where chaos ended and order began, or where order ended and chaos began. The distinction no longer mattered. The fortress anchored itself, not to space, not to time, to will, to purpose, to the simple absolute certainty that it belonged exactly where it was. From the depths of the eye, powers stirred. Demons, demon princes. The champions of the chaos gods themselves. They felt the intrusion, the presumption, the audacity of something claiming territory at the threshold of their domain. They came to test this newcomer, to break it, to feast on its ambition. They met Nazarik's gates. They met Cocytus. They met death that did not hunger, order that did not fade, logic that could not be corrupted. One by one they fell, or fled, or stood confused, unable to comprehend what they faced. How do you corrupt something that has already died? How do you tempt something that feels emotion but is not enslaved by it? How do you break something that chose to be broken and came back stronger? The chaos gods watched, waited, wondered, and for the first time in their existence, they felt something they had never experienced before. Uncertainty. It tasted like poison. Inside Nazarik in the throne room, Ain sat in silence. Around him his guardians waited, loyal, patient, eternal. He could feel the warp pressing against his fortress, could hear the whispers of demons offering power, could sense the chaos gods studying him like a puzzle that refused to be solved. He ignored them all. Instead, he closed his eyes metaphorically as his skull had no lids and reached deeper, past the screaming, past the madness, down to the fundamental nature of the warp itself. What he found there surprised him. The warp was not evil, was not insane. It was simply human. All of humanity's emotions compressed and amplified and allowed to run wild without logic to guide them. Fear becoming Korn, desire becoming Slanesh, ambition becoming Sinch, despair becoming Nurgle. The chaos gods were not the disease, they were the symptom. "I understand now," Ains whispered. "My lord," Albedo leaned closer. "The warp does not need to be destroyed. It needs to be taught." He opened his eyes. Humanity pours emotion into this realm without understanding what they create. The Imperium tries to suppress emotion through faith. The chaos cults try to surrender to emotion without restraint. Both fail because both refuse the truth. What truth? That emotion and logic are not enemies. They are partners. On stood. Chaos exists because humanity forgot how to feel without drowning. The Imperium suffers because they forgot how to think while feeling. He looked at his guardians, beings of logic, who had learned to love warriors of order, who had felt grief creatures of death, who chose meaning over emptiness. "We remember both." Thunder rolled through the warp, not sound, something deeper. The chaos gods had heard him, and they were not pleased. But they were listening. And in the warp, listening is the first step toward obedience. The gods came in their own ways. Korn arrived first, not subtly, never subtly. The warp around Nazarik turned red, not the red of blood, but the red of rage itself made visible. Skulls formed in the air, burning with fury that had outlived galaxies. A figure materialized at Nazarik's gates, massive, armored in brass the color of dried blood. Its head was a skull wreathed in flames. In its hands, an axe large enough to split worlds. A bloodthirster, greater demon of Korn, herald of the blood god. It spoke, and its voice was thunder mixed with screaming. "Thing of bone, pretender, false god." Each word hit like artillery. "You do not bleed. You do not rage. You do not kill for the joy of slaughter. You are insult to my lord. You will be destroyed." Cocytus stepped forward, ice against fire, calm against fury. "Honored warrior," he said. His voice was frost forming on glass. "I am guardian of Nazarik. You may not pass." "Then die!" The bloodthirster swung its axe. The blow could have split mountains, could have shattered fortresses, could have ended armies. It stopped, not blocked, not parried, simply stopped. Frozen in mid-swing, unable to move forward or back, the demon's rage intensified, flames roaring higher. But the axe remained perfectly still. "You fight for slaughter," Cocytus said quietly. "I fight for duty. Rage is loud. Duty is absolute." He moved. One strike, precise as mathematics, beautiful as winter. The bloodthirster's head fell. Its body dissolved into rage and regret flowing back into the warp. But before it faded completely, Cocytus heard it whisper something unexpected. "Worthy." From the red storm came Korn's voice, not angry, curious. "You kill without hate. How? Hate is wasted energy. I kill because it is required. Purpose without passion. That is a pause that shook reality. Interesting. The red faded, but did not disappear. Khorne was watching now, waiting, testing. Slaanesh came as beauty. The space around Nazarick bloomed with colors too perfect to exist. Music played notes that promised everything desire could imagine. Figures danced in the void, their forms shifting between male and female. Human and alien, beautiful and terrible. A voice like honey over poison whispered through the fortress. Little king of nothing, you who feels but does not feast, why do you deny yourself pleasure? Shaltir stepped onto the battlements. Her crimson eyes met the shifting forms without fear. I know pleasure, she said. I have tasted blood across 1,000 battlefields, have felt the ecstasy of perfect violence, have loved with devotion that could shatter souls. Then join me, embrace excess, let your love become obsession, let your hunger become all-consuming. No. Shaltir's voice was soft but absolute. Because my love has purpose, my hunger has meaning. What you offer is just noise, sensation without growth, pleasure without point. You reject paradise. I reject emptiness wearing paradise's mask. Shaltir smiled, showing fangs. True pleasure comes from devotion, from serving something greater than yourself. You would not understand. You only know how to take. I know how to give. The colors dimmed. The music soured. And from the dying beauty came Slaanesh's voice, confused, petulant, intrigued. You love without losing yourself. How deliciously strange. Purple light pulsed from Nazarick. Shaltir's warp-touched blood sang in harmony with it. She was proof of something Slaanesh had forgotten was possible. Controlled passion, disciplined desire, love that chose its object instead of consuming everything in reach. The perfumed storm withdrew, but like Khorne, it did not leave. It circled, observed, wondered. Tzeentch arrived as questions, not physically. The architect of fate did not need a body. Instead, the future fractured around Nazarick. 1,000 possible paths. 1,000,000 potential outcomes, each one branching into infinity. Demiurge stood in his study, surrounded by calculations that would have driven mortal minds to madness. He felt Tzeentch's presence like pressure behind his eyes, a voice that was 9 voices speaking in unison and none at all. Clever demon, you plot and plan and scheme, but to what end? What change do you seek? What future do you architect? The same future, Demiurge replied calmly. Tomorrow is today. Impossible. All things change, all plans collapse, all schemes devour themselves. That is the nature of existence. Then we defy nature. Demiurge smiled his razor smile. Lord Ains has taught us something you cannot comprehend. That change without direction is merely chaos. That ambition without purpose is just noise. We plan, yes, but our plans serve a singular goal. What goal? Stability. The word was delivered like a weapon. Not stagnation, not entropy, but ordered growth, change guided by logic, evolution with intent. We are the antithesis of your nature, changer of ways. We are change that knows where it is going. Silence. Then Tzeentch laughed. The sound was like libraries burning and being rebuilt simultaneously. You are a paradox I did not predict. That makes you either a mistake in my grand design or the most interesting piece on the board. Which am I? Both, neither, something else entirely. The presence intensified. I will watch you, clever demon, and when you inevitably fall to paradox, I will be there to collect the pieces. You will wait a long time. Demiurge said to the empty air. The future stopped fracturing, solidified. For the architect of fate, clarity was not comfort, it was insult. Tzeentch had tried to see Nazarick's fate and found it. Unclear, undefined, unwritten. For the architect of fate that was intolerable, which meant it would keep watching. Nurgle came last and gentlest. The warp around Nazarick began to smell of rot and renewal, of autumn and decay, of things dying. So other things could live. Flies buzzed in patterns that spelled words in languages no living thing should know. The Plague Lord's voice was warm, almost fatherly. "Ah, little Death King, you and I are cousins, are we not? You embrace decay. You are undeath made ruler. We could be such friends." On stood alone on the highest tower. He had been waiting for this one. Had known Nurgle would understand him best, or think it did. "We are nothing alike," Ain said quietly. "Are we not? You accept death. I celebrate it. You rule the dead. I grant them eternal unlife. You reject the tyranny of the living. I free all things from life's cruel demands." "You misunderstand." Ains turned to face the pestilent cloud. "I am not death that continues. I am death that chooses. You offer inevitable decay. I offer deliberate transformation. You are the end all things fall into. I am the path some things choose to walk." Choice. "Oh, my sweet child, there is no choice. All things rot. All things decay. All things return to the garden in the end." "Not me." Ains's eye sockets blazed purple. "I died, truly died. The man I was ceased to exist, but I chose to continue, chose to become this, chose to rule not because I hungered for power, but because no one else would do what needed to be done. And what needed to be done, to prove that death is not the end, that decay is not inevitable, that even in a universe drowning in chaos order can be chosen, maintained, protected." Ain spread his arms. "You offer acceptance. I offer defiance. You are what happens when life gives up. I am what happens when death refuses to." The warm voice grew colder, less patient. "You reject my gifts, my understanding, my love. I reject your surrender dressed as peace." Ains lowered his arms. "Go back to your garden, grandfather. Tend your plagues, nurture your diseases. But know this Nazarick will not rot, will not decay, will stand eternal not because we cannot die, but because we choose not to." The smell of decay lingered, then slowly faded, and with it came Nurgle's voice, softer now, almost sad. "You will learn. All things do. When your fortress crumbles and your servants fall and you stand alone in the ruins of your defiance, I will still be waiting, patient, kind, ready to welcome you home." "Then wait forever," Ains replied to the empty air. But even as the plague god's presence withdrew, Ains felt something unexpected. Respect. All 4 chaos gods had come. All 4 had tested him, and all 4 had found something they did not expect. A being that touched their power but refused their dominion. A god that chose his nature instead of being enslaved by it. In the throne room, Ons gathered his guardians one final time. They stood before him. Cosida, Shalter, Demiurge, Albedo, Aura, Mary, Pandora's actor. Each one changed by the warp, each one still themselves. "They will come again," Ain said. "The chaos gods will test us, try to break us, offer us power beyond imagining if only we surrender our will to theirs." "And we will refuse," Albedo said. "Not a question, a statement of fact." "Yes." Ains looked at each of them. "Because we have learned something they cannot comprehend. That power without choice is slavery. That strength without purpose is just destruction. That even gods can be wrong." "What do we do now, my lord?" Cocytus asked. Ains was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke words that would echo through the warp itself. "We build. Not an empire, not a crusade. A refuge. A place where beings can choose their own gods, or choose none at all, where emotion and logic can coexist, where death is not the end but simply another choice to be made. The Imperium will oppose us," Demiurge noted. "Let them. Chaos will try to corrupt us," Shaltir added. "Let them try. The galaxy will call us heretics," Pandora's actor said with theatrical flair. "They already do." Ains smiled his impossible smile. "Let them call us whatever they wish. We know what we are. We are Nazarick. We are the proof that there is a third path, between blind faith and mindless chaos, between the Emperor's tyranny and the ruinous power's madness." He stood from his throne, walked among them, place skeletal hands on shoulders that had carried him through death and beyond. "We are the god in the warp," he said softly. "Not because we demand worship, but because we offer something the galaxy has forgotten." "What is that?" Mare whispered. Ains looked through the walls of his fortress, through the warp itself, toward the distant stars where humanity suffered and struggled and died for gods that no longer listened. "Hope, Issa," he said. "Real hope. Not the kind promised by priests or demons, but the kind earned through choice, through sacrifice, through choosing to stand when the universe says you should kneel." Thunder rolled through the warp, not from the chaos gods this time, from something else. From the billions of souls trapped in this realm, hearing those words and remembering just for a moment what it felt like to believe. The warp shuddered, and Nazareth, floating at the edge of the Eye of Terror, shone with purple light that cast shadows across infinity itself. Far away on Terra, in the throne room of the Imperium of Man, the God Emperor of mankind felt something impossible. Competition. For 10,000 years, he had been the only viable alternative to chaos, the only light in the darkness, the only hope for a species drowning in horror. Now, there was another, not human, not exactly God, but something that offered what he could no longer provide, choice. From his golden throne, through layers of psychic wards and prayers, the Emperor reached out, not to attack, not to destroy, simply to acknowledge. "You will fail!" he sent across the gulf between them. "All who try this path fail. Compassion becomes weakness. Choice becomes chaos. Hope becomes despair." Ains received the message, considered it, then replied with absolute certainty. "Perhaps, but I will fail on my own terms. Not because a god commanded it, not because fate decreed it, but because I chose to try and found I was not strong enough. That still ends in ruin." "No." Ains sent back. "That is being human, even when you are not." Silence stretched across the void, then the Emperor withdrew. But before his presence faded completely, Ains felt something unexpected. Not approval, not alliance, but recognition. One god acknowledging another, one ruler understanding what it meant to sacrifice everything for a dream that might be impossible. And in that moment, Ains Wal Gown, undead, overlord, sorcerer, king, the god in the warp, knew that whatever happened next, he had already achieved something remarkable. He had made the universe pause and consider and doubt, and in doubt there was room for something new to grow. Nazareth floated at the edge of eternity. Above it, the Imperium, the real universe where stars burned and humans struggled and the Imperium slowly died. Below it, the warp, the realm of chaos and emotion, where gods played games with mortal souls. And in the space between, anchored by will alone, stood proof that neither extreme had to win. That there could be order in chaos, purpose in madness, meaning in death. Inside the fortress, Ains sat upon his throne and looked at his hands, bone and purple fire, dead and alive, logical and emotional, impossible and absolutely real. "We did it," he whispered to the empty room, to his lost friends, to the guild that no longer existed, to Suzuki Satoru, the man he had been before becoming this. "We became gods, not by demanding worship, but by refusing to stop caring." The throne room doors opened. His guardians entered, loyal, devoted, eternal. And for the first time since becoming undead, Ains felt something that was not suppressed by his nature or filtered through cold logic. He felt proud, not of power, not of conquest, but of them, of what they had become, of what they proved was possible. "Thank you," he said to them, "for following me into death and beyond it." Albedo smiled. "There is nowhere else we would rather be." "Then let us begin," Ains commanded. "The Imperium has had 10,000 years to save humanity. Chaos has had eternity to corrupt it. Now," he stood, purple light blazed, "now it is our turn." The warp trembled, and somewhere in the darkness something new began to grow. Not faith, Not chaos, but hope. Terrible, beautiful, impossible hope. The report reached Terra 300 days after Nazarick disappeared. It arrived not through astropathic transmission, those had been silent since the Tomb Fortress entered the warp. Not through courier ship, none had returned from the New World. It arrived in the hand of Canoness Miriel Solde, the only survivor of the Radiant Crusade who still had the strength to speak. She knelt before the High Lords of Terra in the Chamber of Judgment. Her armor was scorched black, her face was gaunt, her eyes had seen things that faith alone could not explain. "Speak," commanded the Lord Inquisitor. "Tell us what happened to the Crusade." Miriel's voice was barely a whisper. "We found God, and he was not the Emperor." The chamber erupted in outrage, accusations of heresy, demands for her immediate execution. But the Lord Inquisitor raised his hand for silence. "Continue." "The undead King Ains Ul Gown, he did not die when we struck him. He evolved, learned, became something we have no name for." Her hands trembled. "He killed our brothers, destroyed our weapons. Then he spoke to us, not in words, in understanding." What did he say? That we were slaves calling ourselves faithful, that the Emperor demands everything and offers only suffering in return, that there is another way. She looked up. "My Lord Inquisitor, I watched Space Marines lay down their weapons. I watched Psychers who had served for decades question their purpose. I watched faith itself crack like glass. And you," the Inquisitor's voice was sharp as a blade, "did you question?" Miriel was silent for a long moment. Then she reached into her armor and pulled out a small object, a piece of bone carved with symbols that glowed faint purple in the dim light. "He gave me this. Said it was proof that even the dead can choose mercy, that even monsters can love." She placed it on the floor. "I do not know what I believe anymore, my lord, but I know what I saw. The undead did not hate us. They pitied us." The Inquisitor stared at the carved bone. Around the chamber, the High Lords leaned forward. In that small fragment, they saw their greatest fear realized. Not an enemy they could fight, an enemy they could understand. "Burn it, Saint-Corridute. Bamber," the Inquisitor commanded. "Burn her testimony. Seal all records of this crusade. The New World is declared perdita lost to the Imperium. Any ship that approaches it will be destroyed on sight." "And the creature?" one of the High Lords asked. "This Ains Ul Gown." The Inquisitor looked at Miriel, at the bone fragment, at the fear in his own heart that he would never admit aloud. "We do nothing, not yet. If he wanted to invade the Imperium, he would have done so already. If he wanted to spread his heresy, he would have sent missionaries. Instead, he simply exists, at the edge of the Eye of Terror, neither chaos nor imperial, neither demon nor angel." "Then what is he?" "A question." The Inquisitor stood. "And questions, High Lords, are sometimes more dangerous than wars." The chamber fell silent. The bone fragment was taken away. Miriel was led to a cell where she would spend the rest of her life in isolation. Her testimony erased from history. But as she walked through the corridors of Terra, she whispered words no one else could hear. Words Ains had spoken to her before she left. "Tell them I am waiting, not for war, not for conquest, but for the day they are ready to choose. And when that day comes, Nazarick will remember mercy." She did not know if she believed them, but she remembered them. And in the Imperium, memory was a form of faith. In the Eye of Terror, Nazarick floated in its impossible position. The fortress had changed, was still changing. New towers grew from foundations that existed in multiple realities at once. Gardens bloomed with flowers that fed on emotion instead of light. The walls hummed with power that was neither warp nor magic, but something born from the marriage of both. In the throne room, Ains sat surrounded by his guardians. "The Imperium has declared us perdita," Albedo reported. "Lost and forgotten, they will not come for us again." "Good." Ains's voice was calm. "Let them believe we are no threat. Let them focus on their endless wars against chaos. We have work to do." "What work, my lord?" Mare asked quietly. Ains looked at them all, his family, his proof, his reason for defying death itself. We build. He gestured, and a map of the warp appeared before them. Not a physical map, those could not capture this place, but a map of emotion, of pain points, of places where suffering concentrated like festering wounds. There are souls trapped in the warp, billions of them. Humans who died screaming, aliens who were consumed by chaos, children who never had a chance to choose their fate. You wish to save them? Demiurge asked, not skeptical, curious. I wish to give them what no god has ever offered. Ain stood. Choice. The choice to rest, the choice to fight, the choice to fade away or to continue, the choice to serve a god or to serve themselves. He walked to the window that showed the swirling madness of the eye. The Imperium offers only obedience. Chaos offers only corruption. We will offer something the galaxy has forgotten was possible. He turned back to them. We will offer hope, not false hope, not promises of paradise, but the simple, brutal truth that even in the darkest place in the universe there can be order, there can be purpose, there can be meaning. The chaos gods will oppose us, Shaltir said. Let them. The Emperor will condemn us, Cocytus added. He already has. The galaxy will call us heretics, Pandora's actor declared dramatically. Traitors, abominations. Ain smiled his impossible smile. They already do, but words are just wind. What matters is what we build, what we prove. That death is not the end, that undeath is not damnation, that even beings made of logic and bone can love fiercely enough to defy eternity itself. He raised one skeletal hand. Purple fire danced across his fingers. This is our eternal crusade, not of conquest, not of conversion, but of existence. We will stand here at the edge of madness, and we will show the universe that there is another way, that gods can be wrong, that faith can be questioned, that hope. The fire blazed brighter. Hope can be earned instead of promised. Thunder rolled through the warp, not from chaos, not from the Imperium, but from something else, from the souls who heard those words and remembered just for a moment what it felt like to have a choice. The Guardians bowed as one. We serve, they said together, not because we must, but because we choose to. Ains looked at each of them in turn. Then he nodded. Then let us begin. Far away in a forgotten corner of the warp where no daemon dared to tread, something stirred. A soul. Human. Dead for centuries. Trapped in endless torment. It heard a voice. Calm. Patient. Offering not salvation but something simpler. A choice. The soul reached toward that voice. And for the first time since dying, it felt something it had thought lost forever. Peace. Not the peace of oblivion. Not the peace of surrender, but the peace of knowing that even here, even now, even at the end of everything, there was still a choice to be made. And in the darkness of the warp, a small light appeared. Purple, steady, growing, one soul at a time, one choice at a time. The god in the warp kept his promise. In the Imperium on 1,000 worlds, people dreamed. They dreamed of a fortress made of bone. Of a king who was dead but would not die, of guardians who loved so fiercely that reality itself bent to their will. They woke remembering only fragments, a color, purple, a feeling, hope, a question. What if the gods are wrong? The Imperium's priests called it corruption. Chaos whispered it was a trick. The Inquisition burned those who spoke of it too loudly. But the dreams continued. And in those dreams a voice spoke, not commanding, not demanding, simply offering. There is another way. When you are ready to see it, we will be waiting. The eternal crusade had begun, not with fire and steel, but with whispers and dreams. And sometimes that was more dangerous than any army. On Nazarik's highest tower, Ain stood alone. Behind him, his fortress hummed with purpose. His guardians prepared for the work ahead. His subjects, living, dead, and everything between, built the foundation of something new. Before him, the warp stretched into infinity. Chaos on one side, order on the other, and in the middle, a space that belonged to neither, a space that belonged to choice. Suzuki Satoru, Ains whispered to himself, to the man he had been, to the friend of friends long gone. We did it. We found a purpose worth dying for, worth coming back from death for. He looked at his skeletal hands, at the purple fire that would never fade. I do not know if we will succeed, if our refuge will last, if hope is truly possible in a universe this broken. He clenched his fists, but I know we will try. And trying when gods say it is impossible is itself a form of divinity. The warp answered, not with words, with feeling, recognition, respect, and perhaps a whisper of something the warp had not felt in millennia, gratitude, because Ain's Ual gown had done something no one else had dared. He had stood at the edge of eternal madness, and he had said no further, and the madness had paused and wondered, and in that moment of wonder something impossible had been born. Hope, fragile, unlikely, absurd, but real.